moving over to the African region next, and activists have illuminated Johannesburg's skyline with projections demanding urgent reforms to address the global debt crisis and calls for climate accountability as G20 leaders are set to gather for the first summit on African soil. Kathleen Famodi, the director of the New Economy Hub, has criticised current global lending systems, saying that African nations now spend more on debt servicing than on public health care, with 25 allocating more to the debt than education. Let's take a listen in.
We are here tonight to project this message to the G20 leaders and their retinues who have come from all over the world to really bring a focus to the debt crisis that is facing the majority world and especially African countries. African countries are really good payers. They are really consistent in paying their debts to the extent that they deny their people, their nations, the basics of life in order to be able to service their debt costs. And yet defaulting countries in Europe have their interest costs priced at a much cheaper rate. If anything, this is another kind of imperialism.
The rally comes as civil society groups urge South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to champion the debt cancellation agenda at the G20. An open letter signed by 160 organisations stressed the need for bold leadership in addressing debt burdens. While praising South Africa's advocacy for reforms, activists have called for courage from wealthier nations to implement systemic change. Joining us once again is Shruti Dasgupta, and also Andrew K.P. Leung joins us. He's a China strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, I wanted to start with you. Many African nations argue that they're trapped between Western leaders and Chinese creditors. Does the G20 have any real ability to break this deadlock?
Well, let's put this debt problem in some sort of a historical context. It's not the first time that African nations facing the debt crisis. Let's trace back to about 20 or 30 years ago. The same sort of thing happened, resulting in sort of debt relief and calling for more aid, in other words, interest free, either loans or gifts. But it didn't work because the money didn't solve the problem of poverty because what drives the economy is the capacity of the people to build their own lives, to build their own, create their own jobs, to grow the economy, and to attain a degree of self-reliance and sustainability, not just on the climate sense, but in the sustainability of the economy, rather than relying on debt. So it is another carrying call for a kind of development model for struggling nations in the Global South in particular. And of course, a number of countries in the Global South have graduated from the debt crisis. We'll look at some of the countries in Asia or even in Latin America. But it also points to the fact that people need to be educated in the skills. There ought to be more schools. There ought to be more infrastructure, roads, highways. So I think that this is a carrying call. And then in this context, China plays a very important role because China model is very different from the West. The West engagement with Africa is also based on the bottom line, using the so-called IMF model. Everything needs to be changed to create the market. But the market, if you look at some of the countries in Africa, they're growing coffee, they're growing soybeans. Where's the money gone? The money has go to large multinationals.
Yes.
And so the benefits don't trickle down. Whereas the people at the bottom, they lack skills, they lack education, they lack healthcare. I think that this is more important dynamics involved than just debt relief.
Okay, Shruti, I wanted to bring you in here. Is this a sign of rising global South frustration with the current international financial architecture?
Absolutely right, because the Western inclined architecture of money lending is harming the nations that are actually contributing the most to the world's GDP. And there is about 60% of the world's population, 75% of the global trade, and all of this is being represented at G20, out of which as of now the West represents very little in terms of both population as well as GDP, but the rules are inclined towards them very positively, whereas the African nations, who have suffered a whole lot under both the colonial rules as well as the internal civil wars that were incited by some external force or internal force, they continue to face problems, civil problems inside their own societies. How do they grow until and unless the nations that are supposed to be richer than them, they are give them a helping hand. They ensure that these places are places of where humanity itself will find a new hope. And that is something which is definitely lacking in terms of policy as far as money lending to these economies is concerned. If they are left to service their debts year after year, and there are defaulters that are given lower rates, more extensions and more loans. My home nation's neighbor, Pakistan, being a prime example of that. They're given good, like sinking good money after bad in certain economies because it suits your political purpose. Then it looks very bad for the world in general. So IMF needs to rethink its policies towards African nations, as well as the Western nations need to think about how they look at African nations, not as a liability, but as a potential where growth of humanity, industry, as well as general world power can be effective.
Okay, Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Andrew, do stay with us as we have further updates to discuss. Now, Zambia has welcomed Chinese Premier Li